Crypt Hammer, maybe you can weigh in on a subject that I talked about earlier in the year. I interviewed a woman who plays cello in a metal band and was part of an ensemble, a neoclassical ensemble called Amber Asylum, who released albums on Relapse. And we're discussing the nature of metal and the nature of classical music. And my point was, we only call it classical or neoclassical because of the instruments that it's played on. But if you took those exact same songs, those exact same notes, and played it on guitar, bass, drums, it would automatically become metal. What do you think? Is there something to metal that's more than just the instruments that it's played on, or does metal by definition have to be guitar, bass, and drums?
That's an interesting question. I think that I'm probably kind of a traditionalist in the sense that I think that metal has to be played on guitar and drums, which maybe feels like a little bit silly to say, because there's certainly like a darkness that overlaps. I just discovered Amber Asylum this week, and they're super cool. And I know what you mean. There's also other sort of like dark and industrial music. Like you probably are familiar with Lingua Ignota and Kristen Hayter and the different projects that she has. And I wouldn't call it metal exactly, but it definitely, like, I don't know, it's on my steady rotation. And
it's extreme for sure.
Yeah.
It's scarier than most metal.
Yeah. I think that this
work, yeah. Like
metal to me sounds like pieces of metal like being hit against one another. Like the closest I can get to that with instruments is metal. But I don't know. What do you think? Would you put Amber Asylum in the metal world?
Me personally?
Yeah, you, Adrian.
I do consider them a metal band that's not using metal instruments.
Yeah.
But I also, I have a fairly, I'm sort of coming around. For most of my life, I was a guy in a metal shirt who had very strong opinions about what is and what is not metal. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like a lot of stuff that was too melodic or a little bit too bombastic, I would be like, well, that's not really metal because there's like a happiness to it.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how to describe it. Like to me, metal was something very, very dark and very aggressive and almost nihilistic. Going back to early Black Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm sort of coming around to the idea that maybe like quote unquote metal, quote unquote punk, there's spectrums to these genres, and what I was attracted to wasn't necessarily the metalness, because you can't say that a band like Dragon Force is not metal.
Yeah.
No, they're super fucking metal. They're like too metal.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, there's a cartoonishness to it that is not why I got into this music. I got into this music because I was angry and I heard Master of Puppets and all I wanted to do was kill people, and that music fit what I was going through. That music fit my state of mind. And then, that led to like Sepultura and Entombed and Napalm Death, and I was interested in that and very centered on that. And, when I discovered industrial bands and punk bands who all had that kind of feeling, to me, it wasn't really necessarily that I cared that one was a punk band or one was an industrial band and one was a death metal band. It was just a certain mood that they all encompassed. And now I'm realizing metal is a big tent to the point where it almost fails as a descriptor, because I can name a number of my close friends who all are to some extent metalheads. And if you ask them what they're listening to, none of them will name the same bands. You know what I mean? Like one guy will be more into like the doomy kind of Sabbathy kind of stuff, and another guy will be into like, old 80s Metallica and Iron Maiden, and another guy will just want, I have two different friends who love Finnish metal and Finnish death metal bands, and they don't listen to any of the same bands. From within the same country, they don't listen to the same bands. So I don't know. I mean, I think like kind of what I'm moving towards is the idea of underground music, and kind of these groups who are making music that's not palatable, that there's a kind of discomfort and a kind of ugliness to it. And so, Amber Asylum with their classical instrumentation, they're not making comforting music. There's a feeling of dread and ominousness to it, which you can also compare to Napalm Death, which you can also compare to like Skinny Puppy. And so it's like, within the overlap of all these different kinds of music, there are artists who are kind of working with the same palette, so to speak.
You know what? You won me over. I changed my mind, because I'm thinking about, like when I heard Chelsea Wolfe's first album, it never even crossed my mind that it wasn't a metal album. But I think the drummer uses brushes most of the time. And yeah, so yeah. You won me over.
Yeah, but also, like, I mean, part of my thinking is like, okay, well, if somebody like Dylan Carlson from Earth or Wino from The Obsessed will do acoustic shows where they play their songs, they play the same songs that they used to play with a band, just with an acoustic guitar. And so it's not like they suddenly became folk musicians. It's the same songs that were doom metal songs, just on a different instrument and in a different setting. And so to me, like, there has to be something, even if it's just a minor chord or a certain pace or a certain tempo that makes something quote unquote heavy. There has to be something to metal that's more than just guitar, bass, and drums.
I really like those projects like Steve Von Till or Mike from Yob, where they're doing their music in that acoustic format. I feel like sometimes the aggressiveness of guitar and drums sort of insulates you from the vulnerability that the music is creating. And when you take away that quote unquote heaviness of guitars and drums, that you are actually, that there's the humanity of it is a little bit more apparent. And I think that's actually kind of confrontational in metal. I think we kind of wrap the music in that aggression to sort of insulate the emotionally vulnerable side of it. And when it's stripped away, sometimes it's more in your face than Neurosis when you see Steve Von Till, because you have to confront the kind of fragile humanity of it that isn't there otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even Steve Von Till's solo stuff, when he's just playing chords on an acoustic guitar, it still has this feeling of like something terrible is about to happen. You know what I mean? Like there's
yes, ominous.
Yeah, he uses the same build-up. He uses the same. I'm not sure. Maybe Crypt Hammer. The word I'm looking for in music, when the tension and release that you get from a Neurosis song, he's still using it with an acoustic guitar and just his voice.
I mean, it's probably, you could call it some kind of a very powerful dynamic.
Dynamic, exactly, yeah.
Map. Yeah.
this is sort of like serving almost the opposite purpose, right? To like have that extreme side, but it doesn't have to be reconciled with the self of the daily self. And actually that's what my name means, warg, like to have another wolf self, or to be in a wolf persona. And that has always resonated with me. And I think that there's another much more practical thing, and that's that some of our members are in multiple bands, so instead of being another band for this person, another band, it's somebody else. It doesn't have to be this other person's band. It can just be, you can kind of stand alone. The other thing also on a practical sense is, at least here, like, nobody is making that effort. So that seemed like an opportunity for us to kind of step up. And it's just a first step. I would love to have that be something that grows and has a life of its own, but not hopefully getting to kill each other. Although it could be good for record sales. So I don't know. We'll consider it.
Yeah, it's not off the table entirely, but I think, wearing cloaks on stage also has the other practical benefit of I've been in bands for a long time, and I hate being on stage in the public eye. And when Todd had this idea to play with cloaks on, I was just so relieved with the idea, because it's not just being on stage it's not exactly like a stage fright, but it is a really uncomfortable sensation. And talking to people after a show, and you play a show and it's so intense, and you get off stage and you just kind of feel like a crazy person for a little while, and it's like the last time I'm really capable of having a conversation with anybody. So if I can go off stage and just go and not be recognized, it's that's like a huge plus for me.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit about some of the lyrical themes of the album. Tell me a little bit about Salvador de Guerra.
Well, that was after reading several books about that conquest history. He was kind of a good one for me to sort of use as a focal point to write these stories, of these horrific stories from a specific point of view. And I landed on him. It's not, there's nothing particularly special about him. He's kind of a representation of what the priest caste was doing to Native people in general. So there's nothing exceptional about his specific brutality, other than it was very well documented. One thing about the Spanish is they were very meticulous. So they kept a lot of notes. Everybody kept a lot of notes about what was happening. But just for example, I'm flaying people's skin off and putting them in turpentine. But there's this interesting dynamic when these priests were coming to New Mexico, because they believed that they were obviously doing God's work, but there was also this hope, or even wishing that they would be martyred, that like perhaps they could push so hard for God's will that they would be killed. And so there was, all bets were off. There was no holding back regarding what they were willing to do or what they were willing to inflict onto other people, because if it came back to them, if they were killed, it was in fact a good thing. So to me, this is such religious madness, such insanity, that it was so captivating to think about being in that mindset and talking, almost being that preacher, giving those sermons, or being willing to sacrifice yourself and others, believing the entire time that what you are doing is serving God's purpose. And obviously there's so much criticism of religion in metal, and I'm so grateful for that. That's one of the reasons I connected to it. But I thought psychologically I wanted to maybe be in that mindset instead of just critiquing it, to kind of wear that mantle of religious madness and embody it a little bit. So there's this a little bit of dual vocals. I don't want to say clean, but maybe like a little bit more legible. And that's paired with the guttural vocals. And so I'm trying to create these multiple voices kind of speaking out of a single mouth.
We spoke a little bit about how your area and your surroundings influence your music. And you also mentioned the Daniel Lake interview. Daniel Lake wrote a book about US black metal. And when I interviewed him, part of what I wanted to know is what makes US black metal unique from other types of black metal. And, part of that is my personal bias, because I got into this kind of music in the 90s. So I have a really hard time separating the idea of black metal or the sound of black metal or the perception of what it should be from Scandinavia and mountains and snow and winter and all that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, when we're talking about US black metal, there's a scene in the Pacific Northwest which has its own environment, its own specific type of weather. There are East Coast bands who could presumably write about winter, but also deal with a lot of urban themes if they're based in densely populated metropolitan areas. And you also have this scene emerging from the Southwest. I think of a band like Yaltomiklan, who are from Utah, and obviously there's a growing scene in New Mexico. I guess let's circle back to the desert and how it influences your music. Would you say that there's something very specific about your sound coming from where you come from?
Well, I read Daniel Lake's book and I loved it. And I think that the takeaway for me in relationship to US black metal is that America is huge. And then there's all these regional scenes. And sometimes they do reflect where they're coming from. But that has to be a conscious choice now, especially in the internet age. Like, people can be from anywhere in the world and decide to make Swedish melodic death metal, right? Like, it has to be a conscious choice to make music that is related to your surroundings. And I want that to be an objective of ours. And whether we achieve it or not, I don't know. That's kind of up to the listener to decide. But I think that it would be great to be like Imperial Triumphant, for instance. They sound like New York. They have done everything they possibly could to infuse their music with the spirit of that city in all of its like disgusting, multifaceted Art Nouveau or Art Deco, power. And that's something to strive for where we're from. And that will take you years of focused development. But yeah, I want that to be an objective, to express something unique that really you might not get there any other way other than being here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that there's something probably that we all share in common about being so close to the nature that is provided by New Mexico and how easy it is to get away from people. I think that that's something, that we all like. I love New York. I like cities and stuff like that, but I love being out in this isolated kind of an environment. And I feel like metal can really speak to that. Like, I can hear a lot of the darkness of Leviathan that comes, like, I guess he's from San Francisco, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he lives in Portland now, but
in Portland.
Yeah, when he made all of those early albums, I think he was in San Francisco.
Yeah. I don't know. If Leviathan sounds like San Francisco now. It sounds like the Outer Mission, or not the Outer Mission, the outer sunset areas where it's just like foggy and dark all the time. Like I can hear that a lot.
Ludicra is the San Francisco black metal. That's
I mean, there's a griminess to the bands that are coming out of the Bay Area, which, part of it is a lot of those guys grew up in the punk scene there. Obviously Gilman and all the hardcore bands that came out of that area. But part of it is also San Francisco as a city has a lot of grime, has a lot of, darkness and crime and urban conflict and stuff like that. And so you can kind of feel this tension. I mean, a lot of it is reading into the music after the fact. Like, I don't know if I necessarily would have thought of Krallice as a New York band if I didn't know they were from there. But in retrospect, it makes sense to me that the bands who are coming from these densely packed cities would come up with this more frenetic kind of, almost like ADD kind of black metal. Do you know what I mean? Where, it very much feels like
they're amazing. I mean, I find that's an interesting question because I find that to be another great example that is inseparable for me from New York, or Annie Con or Yellow Eyes. But I don't know if that's because I know they're from there or they've just sublimated their surroundings.
And it may just be, the kind of personalities that are attracted to these kind of cities. Like, I don't know what led Jeff Russ to move to Portland. When I think of like Portland and the Pacific Northwest black metal scene, obviously it's that very shoegazy, very kind of hypnotic, droney type of black metal, which makes sense for if you're living out near the woods or very close to nature. And there's a similarity to some of the bands from the Southwest, like Yaltomiklan, who also do a kind of atmospheric, almost shoegazy kind of sound. But obviously, being based in the Southwest, you could say that it's more influenced by the desert and their surroundings there.
Yeah.
Yeah.